So, this is the last of the last of the last. The fifth place of the top five greatest animes of all times. Name is Maki. I do gaming, I do anime, and I do um, manga. Or manhwa or manhwa. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It's comics, foreign comics. Um, and I do these things for fun. They're not really necessary for me to achieve anything other than every now and again I just want to inform people of what it is that this could give to you, or how to get a form of entertainment from this. Yes, there are plenty of people online that do these things, but these people do these things from a point of view of trying to sell you something to get something in return. Very rarely you would actually meet people who are just doing a thing to do a thing, and you can't really get an honest opinion from someone who's trying to get something in return. So that's why I do these things. Do I really have to? Not really. Is it for the general public? Not really. It's more like for me and my clan members. It's for them, or it's for you guys who are in the clan. But if other people see it outside of the clan, that's all good too. But it was never tailored for that. This channel wasn't really created for anything outside of the public. But I'm not going to just deny honest opinion when I see a whole lot of people, who aren't really into anime pretend to be into anime, or who aren't into something or gaming pretend to be into something. You know, just because you could do something doesn't mean you're really into it. If you feel shy or curious, or you feel like this you're doing something wrong, or how did I ever get into this, is because you were never into it to begin with. That's why a lot of artists, when they tell people they're artists, animation artists or illustration artists, and everyone else in the room who are around them are either musicians or football players or accountants or business managers or restaurant owners. They all snub their nose and stuff. Um, the person who feels shy or not proud of what it is that they took to be a career, and they've been doing it for years, that person who feels like they're inferior in any way to those individuals, means that that person never really loved what they love. If they're going to need you know the acceptance of people who are in jobs, so to speak, that are more important than theirs, which really isn't, because society isn't balanced off by one type of job only. It's balanced off by many type of jobs. For instance, you know entertainment, from an entertainment point of view, how many times do you think people could go to a ball game before they say, I'm not interested in going to ball games anymore. Give me a different form of entertainment. And if it wasn't for that type of behavior, none of those things would exist. We wouldn't be here where we are today. If everybody wanted to be a banker, then the world would be a miserable place, because not everyone wants to be calculated like that, or to say that they're like that, or to enjoy a life like that, to waste majority of their life behind the table so that they could get a lot of money in a short period of time and retire early, and then say, yeah, I was smart like that. But your entire youth, from your 20s all the way to your 40s, were pure hell. Like, how could you actually say that you've enjoyed your life with sacrifices? If you sacrifice a portion of your life for others, then you decided to be a bitch and a slave to someone else. So you haven't really had a fulfilled life. You only had a portion of your fulfilled life after you got to a certain point, not the whole shebang. So you really can't compare yourself to everybody who's able to micromanage their lives to have enjoyment in step processes. You only enjoy that at the end. That's why I always laugh at those type of bankers. So moving on from that, not the bankers that use their common sense, the one that's trying to get there real fast and say, well, I'm at the end of the road while you're still struggling. Like, yeah, but you really decide to become bitch made in order to get to where you have. I don't need to be around you. So moving on from that, we're right into Gintama, things for people who love anime. If you're not into anime, you don't love anime, you don't consider anime to be something that's important or interesting or important to a level that should be considered, you go that way. You go that way and you go bitch made, because you belong over there with the rest of the clownies of the universe. You're on the other side of the spectrum of what is life. Like when people say you're on this part of life instead of this part of life, you're on the darker side of life in what is considered good in life. You're not on the type of, I'm going to eat like a chava to make myself healthy. I'm going to do what I think is going to make myself healthy, even though it's not really going to make myself healthy, but I'm going to do it because I say so. You're on that side. You're not on the side of what actually logically works. So, but that's all good. Doesn't mean you're right. Just means you have that choice. So, this is Gintama, and this anime has been around as long as, you know, Mickey Mouse has been around. It's been around for decades, generation upon generation. It's not going anywhere. I laugh at anyone who think that anime is ever going to go anywhere. It's like saying movies are going to finally die out one day completely, whereas movie could take on many different forms. Same as anime. So, this anime is called Gintama. And Gintama is one of the greatest animes of all times. If not, would be considered by some to be in the top 10 to top 5 list of the greatest anime of all times. Those who say otherwise have probably never seen Gintama. Those who have seen Gintama and said they don't like that type of humor have probably assumed that their type of humor is far more better. And I've seen Lucky Star, and I've seen um, um, uh, Orange Road, and I've seen what was the name? High School Boys Club, and I've seen Daily Lives of High School Boys, and I've seen other forms of entertainment. I've seen other forms of comedy. I've seen uh, Hana. I've seen Rice Balls. I've seen various different comedy anime. I've even seen what was the name of that one way back in the days? Um, Oh My Goddess and Fruit Basket. Um, you know, every now and again, Fushigi and Uji has some comedy in it, but not really. But yeah, I've seen, and even Ranman One Half, which was primarily like slapstick comedy. So I've seen various forms of comedy, and I know what comedy is because one, it's the same as I said in all the videos from top 10 list one all the way to top to where I am number five. In all those videos, whenever I was speaking of anything, it's because I know. And how I know, because I'm an Abbott and Costello guy. If anyone who knows who Abbott and Costello is, they would know what comedy is. If anyone who knows who Peter Sellers is, if you know who Peter Sellers is, then you know what I'm talking about. If you know who what's his name? Well, Will Ferrell is, then you know what I'm talking about. But not Will Ferrell to the level of Abbott and Costello, but Will Ferrell on the same top five greatest comedians of all times list, or top 10 greatest comedians of all times list. We're talking Laurel and Hardy. We're talking Marx Brothers territory. Big boy territory. If you're not in that level, those seeing those type of comedies, then you wouldn't understand. Water under the bridge, as Abbott says. Like, if you know where that came from or what movie that came from, you will understand what comedy is, what real comedy is. Gross comedy is not real comedy, and Gintama has gross comedy in it. But best part about Gintama, it's not ruled by its gross comedy. It only includes those gross comedy, some of them, because there are all types of people who like all types of comedy. That's why Gintama is in the top 5 list. It is not limited to one type of comedy. It's willing to accept and appeal to all type of people who enjoy all types of forms of comedy, even the lewd and disgusting ones. So, I said it before, there are animes for certain type of people, and those people can be kids or not kids. Most of the animes in my top 5 are not meant for kids whatsoever at all. And Gintama is the top shelf of not for kids. Why I say top shelf of not for kids? It has blood. It has guts. It has nudity. Sometimes it has nudity censored. It has personal body parts identified, censored, of course, because you can't do that online, to be shown that type of humor. It has grotesque type of humor. It also have Abbott and Costello type of humor. So Gintama is not limited to one's imagination. You don't need an abridge to Gintama because Gintama is an abridge in and of itself. If you were to add a bridge to what is Gintama, you would make it worse or you would make it too much. It was like drinking a hot cup of coffee. You either put your abridge on top of it and it becomes cool and not a hot coffee anymore, or you would overheat it and make it worse than it is. So Gintama is its own abridge. You don't need anything. So moving on from that, this character's name is Gintoki. So I'm now getting into Gintama. I'm not going to talk about anything else other than Gintama. And I'm not going to state every single arc in the Gintama that were important. I'm going to just identify this anime for what it is and speak on some of the very most important arc of Gintama and why Gintama is in that top 5 list. They're a very rare anime that can make you laugh every time you watch it because Gintama is so ridiculous and so stupid. It's like watching SpongeBob or American Dad or a Bart Simpson on The Simpsons. There are certain things that just doesn't make sense and it's so ridiculous it comes across as funny and entertaining. But at many times it takes itself far more serious than any of those shows ever will. I'm talking to the level of seriousness like that of Luffy fighting against, Enel, uh, or Naruto fighting against Madara. Sometimes it goes soft, but sometimes it gets extremely dark and extremely serious. So that said, that's something that those comedy animes or American television shows can never do. Gintama is the only anime that could go full on Deadpool and get away with it. That's what makes the Gintama different from any other anime. It can break the fourth wall and the fifth wall. If anyone knows what the fifth wall is, when I get to that point, I'm going to tell you. And if it's not the fifth wall, I call it Wall 4.0 Wall 4.5. If it's not really breaking the fifth wall, it's Wall 4.5 because at a certain point in Gintama, it goes past breaking fifth wall. So you're saying to yourself, what the hell am I watching? So this is Gintama. The main character in this anime is called Gintoki. He's silver-haired. He's a samurai in an age where it's considered to be the age of Edo, the age of the Tokugawa shogunate transitioning into the Meiji era. And during this period, instead of the Westerners coming to Japan in Japanese history, which is a real thing during this period, it's stating that aliens, instead of Americans or Westerners or Europeans or the British or the Russians or the Scandinavians or the Finnish or the Irish or Africans, anyone who wasn't Japan that came to Japan during those periods, 18th century, 18th century, 19th century Japan. Anyone who came to the island of Japan during the 18th and 19th century, or late 18th, early 19th century, were considered aliens. So, in the place of U.S. and Britain, were full-on aliens, as the word, from another planet. And the Yamatos, or should I say they're called Amatos in the Japanese version. They're Amatos, but people say the Yamatos as well. I think the Yamatos is different, a group from the Amato. But the Amato are species of aliens, various different species of various different aliens who come to invade the lands of Earth. United States, Britain, so on and so forth. So it's assumed that they're not really representations of the Europeans that came to Japan. They're more like, yes, that's what they are, but the Amatos are invading the entire damn planet. So even the US and Britain are getting invaded at this very moment in history of this fictitious Japan. So Amatos invaded Japan, was invaded other sections of the world, and they basically take over Japan during the feudal era. Um, and during this process, styles of clothing, styles of weaponry, styles of warfare, styles of combat, everything that you have ever known that is modern now to this very day. Cell phones, automatic weapons, things you saw in Back to the Future, hover cars, all those things that are considered futuristic, or possible futuristic, or things we have in modern everyday right now. Pieces of papers and pens instead of sheets of notes and pamphlets and ink brushes were replaced by pens and papers and stuff. Yeah, and old computer and telegrams replaced by straight up phones and stuff. So the Amatos brought these things. Basically, it's saying that Amato changed up everything that you would possibly know from things that were to come into the great and distant future, and pull them from the future into what is Edo Japan. So when our characters start to run around wearing funny looking clothes and you think, oh, they're just the main characters of the story, that's not the case. Turns out, I originally thought it was simply the case. Our protagonist just wear a certain style. He's the main protagonist. He does what he does. He has to look different from everyone else. That turns out that's not the case. His style of clothing is of the samurai era, but it's also a combination based on. Oh, one second. It's also a combination based on the world that has been changed during the period of the Edo era. When Tokugawa was no more, or in this world, I don't even believe Tokugawa existed. This is an alternate reality Japan, or alternate world Japan, told from a fictitious point of view. So yeah, that said, when Jump released Gintama to the world, that's when the game of comedy changed, and eventually it became this anime, and eventually it's here. When we see certain characters in the scene, and Gintama is sitting in a place where he does work, or should I say, where he does no work whatsoever at all, and he's basically a guy that's a sword for hire, an ex-samurai in an age where samurai is not needed. Hint: the transition from old shogunate to Meiji period. So it's kind of an indication of that's what's happening at this time as well. But in this case, it's simply he's using his swords during a period to get work, like a detective. So you could basically say his place is like that of the office of a detective, a private detective. Even though he's not really a detective, it's more like he's a gun for hire, or he's willing to do any jobs. And the name of his place is called Odd Jobs because they are willing to do any type of jobs whatsoever in order to get money to pay for their rent or to make them live day to day. And they call the store Odd Jobs because they're willing to do any type of jobs, or which falls under the word odd or normal. Or I guess when you mix everything that's bizarre with normal, it's all odd, to be honest with you. So the secondary character of this story is called Shinpachi. He's seen right here, and Shinpachi is kind of like the Odd Jobs butler, but he's not really the butler, or maid, but he's not really the maid. He just took on that role simply because Gintoki is so lazy. And we have a giant dog, which is to the lower left, as not fully seen. That's also part of the Odd Jobs crew. And we have a girl, which is also not seen, which is in the lower south area of this image, which I couldn't capture, who is also part of the crew. Her name is Kagura. So there are various characters that show up. You have your primary character, Gintama, and you have your secondary characters, Shinpachi and Kagura. and the pet as well. Well, not really the pet. The pet is the pet. And moving on from that, well, I guess you could consider him a secondary character because sometimes he's around so many times. You could basically say that he is his own character as well. He's not like the pet. He's more like this character that exists within the Odd Jobs world. Every time he pops up is always trouble that happens. So he's not like a normal pet, and they let him do whatever he wants anyway. So yeah, he's not like a normal pet anyway. He's more like one of the gang. Moving on from that, we get to see their very first actual contract, and they're so shocked by this that they got their very first contract that they decide this is unheard of. Since when do we actually get work? So they basically had this office for, I believe, maybe about a few months or even a year, and not once did they ever get a contract during those months. So they started to think that they just have a store to have a store without no one willing to hire them because their store is pathetic and they're it's weird. They don't really have a business whatsoever at all. I mean, they legitimately decide to have a business and have a logo for their business and the name, but no one cares that they have a business. So after months on end goes by, they decide to give up themselves on trying to get work from other people. So they just basically consider their office location to be like an apartment where they just have to pay rent in order to keep the business going. So this is not really like a business office. This is more like their apartment that they decided to turn into a business location. So they're just trying to pay rent now, even though they have a business name. So they fail spectacularly at their job um, until one day a guy wanted to have a job done. And since they're called odd jobs, and this wasn't odd jobs, this guy came to this location and they got their first ever job. And obviously they're all shocked by this, by them, someone willing to actually hire them to do a job since they've never had a job before. And they thought that no one would ever hire them. So it's surprising to them. Moving on from that, we get to see another character who's very essential towards the Gintama universe. His name is Katsura. Of course, Gintama always calls him Zura. And then his personal character, his assistant, is called Elizabeth, which is a giant-sized looking penguin that's a mascot for him. Um, Here's the weird part about Elizabeth, though. Elizabeth is clearly a dude wearing a suit as a mascot. Unfortunately, Katsura, and I still to this very day do not know if Katsura is fully aware that this guy is, if he's messing around, if Gintama is messing around, I mean, if Gintoki's messing around, if everyone's messing around and messing with this guy. After years and years of watching this, I started to think that these people are just, messing with this dude and pretending to be it, imagining Elizabeth as an actual penguin, walking penguin, and Katsura calling Elizabeth a walk, his assistant, his personal pet, knowing full well that Katsura, I'm pretty sure Katsura knows that this is a dude in a mascot outfit. If not, if that's not the case, and it's 100% true that Zora actually believes that this dude that's in this costume called Elizabeth, or he called it Elizabeth, is actually a dude, isn't a dude, that is actually a creature, even though there was an episode that showed that it was a creature. Um, it's bizarre. We get to see. I don't know. I really don't know. I can't guarantee that what I'm saying is true because it was never revealed that Katsura ever acknowledged that this guy was actually in the suit, or if Katsura is simply brain dead and actually truly believes that this character called Elizabeth, this walking penguin, is actually alive. So if Katsura is really brain dead and it's that stupid that you cannot tell that there's a dude inside this thing, and Gintama is simply messing with Katsura, and is fully aware, then yeah, that's really bad. And Gintoki never brings it up again. Here's the weird part about Gintama though. No one has ever brought this up ever again. At no point did Kagura or Shinpachi or even Gintoki has ever brought up the subject of Elizabeth being a dude in a costume. It was only showed in one episode, and that's it. And it's like a WandaVision episode where WandaVision just erased it and pretended that it never existed. So when Gintoki doesn't bring it up again, or Kagura doesn't bring it up again, or Zura doesn't bring it up again, it's because the anime is letting you, the viewing audience, know that this is who Elizabeth really is, but they will never, the characters in the anime will never remember that. So this is our first example of fourth wall breaking or reverse fourth wall breaking, whereas they don't know what's going on. They don't know that they've been controlled. They don't know what's happening. That the reveal of Elizabeth was only meant for our eyes only. Straight up James Bond, for your eyes only, not for the characters in the show. Down the road, then, and only then, in later episodes, it is revealed that the characters within Gintama soon learn that they're actually part of a comic book strip. And that's where the full-on fourth wall breaking starts. When Gintama, or should I say, the creators decide to project the universe of what they are into the heads of these characters, and basically give them the whole God thing. It's like you were written, you were created, you are supposed to do this. When the comic book comes to an end, you're going to automatically know because I'm giving you a direct link from my mind as I'm drawing this, what is going to happen, and I'm going to let you say it within the manga to the person reading the manga that this is what's happening and that you fully are aware. So you're going to be my voice to tell the audience that this is what's happening. At the same time, you are going to know what this is happening. So you are going to be my very first and personal Ryan Reynolds Deadpool. Now, here's the thing. I do not know if in this anime or in the manga of Gintama, if these characters came out before Deadpool did. That I don't know. I fully believe that the character of Deadpool came out way before this anime ever did. Because I believe Deadpool popped up in the 90s or something like that. Or the late 80s. So I'm aware that Deadpool fourth wall breaking happened before this. But this is the first anime to ever did the fourth wall breaking. So to an extreme level. Not just fourth wall breaking like Ferris Bueller, but go beyond what is fourth wall breaking. So even though Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool can go fourth wall breaking, I believe Gintama was the first anime or first anything visual to actually go beyond fourth wall breaking to borderline between fourth and fifth, or cross the threshold of fourth and go straight into fifth. If not fifth, 4.5. So it's very weird. Moving on from that, we get to meet another character who is Shinpachi's sister. Do not remember her name. Not going to try to. It's bad that I don't remember the name, but like I said, I'm trying to remember every character's in every anime's name, and I don't have time to like go in the internet and look up these people's name because I have a life and I have other things I have to do. I have to get this out as fast as I can so I could get back to those things. All the stuff is done from memory. And yes, sometimes I go there, but sometimes I'm not. My top five, I don't do it for my top five because it's essential that I remember these things on my own. Moving on from that, because the whole thing of remembering things on your own is all about memory. Considering your memory and containing your memory is essential so you could dig in the back of your head to remember these things. Trying to use other things to make you remember is simply those things, brushstrokes to initiate you to remember those things. But if you are able to pull out the information from your own head, then your memory is still good. Moving on from there, we get to see. I mean, your memory's good from the beginning, but your memory's fresh and moving extremely fast if you're able to remember every single detail of every character you've ever seen, which is almost impossible. So moving on from there, we get to see the cops, and yes, I think if it wasn't for the first episode, I believe the second episode is where the comedy really starts. The first episode initiate you into what the world is in bizarrety that is Gintama, but the second episode showed you the comedy aspects that is Gintama. So here is where the comedy really begins. We have a car chase, a police car chase. The police that are in the car, police car, with a siren on the car, are wearing they're wearing Tokugawa, police officer's outfit from the 19th century Japan. Not even from, yeah, from 19th century Japan law enforcement. But they're driving inside a car, a police car, like a 90s police car. It makes no sense. And the weapons they're using are, ancient weapons. So their sidearms are swords, but they carry shotguns and stuff. But it makes no sense. But it's so ridiculous. Yeah. Moving on from that, we get to the next section. After that little chase scene happens, they're trying to stop Gintama and Katsura. And Katsura is basically an enemy of the state. He's considered a terrorist. He's a revolutionist, but he's not really a terrorist. But the world consider him a terrorist, or at least the Japanese government consider him a terrorist, because he was from the Revolutionary Army to try to stop the Amato when they first invaded. And it wasn't just Katsura, it was Gintoki as well, and many other samurai during this age, in order for the foreigners, the aliens, to not invade the islands of Japan. So yeah, there was this big war between the Amato and between the samurais of Japan. Katsura is a remnant of those very different rebel faction or revolutionary factions. Gintama, however, Gintoki, however, decided to separate from Katsura during that period to become his own man and form his own little small business called Odd Jobs. And that was more than a decade ago. This probably happened, or more than 5 years ago. This probably happened. Moving on from that, we get to go to the next scene where we see Gintama strike down on the ground in order to save someone, or at least to stop someone from doing an activity. And this all happened in episode 2. And moving on from that, we get to go into another episode. I'm not sure if this episode 3, 4, or 5, but none of these episodes that I'm going to point out are going to be directly sequential or followed specific path, one after the next, after the next, after the next. So this, I'm just going to do them based on either arc or based on what was the most funniest episode during the period from when I watched it. So this is simply one of those episodes. And this one is the first introduction of the character called Otosuki, or Otosu, not Otosuki, Otosu, Otsue. I believe that's Hirakada Otosu, or Hirakoda Otosu. That was her name, and she's a pop idol of Japan during the Edo period, or transition from Edo to Meiji era, and she's an idol, so to speak. So we're already way past the common sense level of what makes sense, and we're into idol territory of 80s and 90s Japan, all the way back into feudal era. It doesn't make sense, but that is Gintama. So apparently someone has been stalking her, and she went to Odd Jobs in order to try to figure out how to stop this person from stalking her. Shinpachi being an extremely important character towards Otosu's arc later on in future Gintama episodes, is a huge fanboy. So Shinpachi is a huge fanboy of Otosu, and doing so, being a huge fanboy of Otosu, he wants to make sure to stop whoever was coming after Otosu, a stalker or whoever, in order to make sure she's safe. So they were able to succeed in their job and achieve what they were had to do. And eventually they found out um, that the person who actually was trying to sabotage Otosu um, was actually the mother herself, the mother of Otosu, because she wanted Otosu um, to be safe and to not be in the music business, even though she knew that Otosu loved the music business, or it has something to do with that. I'm not exactly sure exactly how it went down, but I do realize that after a certain period, they all basically looked at the mother and said, "You could have done this in a more interesting and more easier way, and just tell us rather than have us running around trying to figure out if there's someone who's trying to murder this woman." However, Gintoki and Shinpachi both look at Kagura, who started to play dumb, like she knows something, and decided to play the whole innocent act. They got pissed off with her, and eventually that whole story comes to a conclusion when the Shinsengumi pops up in order to arrest the dude, um, and which they found out who he was. He was just some regular stalker. Now the Shinsengumi are very important to the story of Gintama because they were actually real Shinsengumi members. Okita was a real Shinsengumi member of Japan during the time of transition between the Meiji era, the Bakumatsu. Okita also showed up within the Rurouni Kenshin arc of that anime. So Okita was a real person that Japan has always used within this anime to represent a member of the Shinsengumi. So every time you hear the word Okita, um, this character was real. If you go online right now, type up Okita. Okita is very much real. Um, Hijikata is also very much real. At least he represents someone that was very much real. Saito also was very much real within the Shinsengumi. As other as some people like most of the main players within Gintama who are Shinsengumi were either related to real characters or were real characters of the Shinsengumi. So moving on from there, we get to see even more characters pop up to the party, and we get to see Catherine, who's also associated with the landlord of Odd Job. So she basically is the one that housed Gintama for the rent money, so that they could pay up, so they could keep their little business running. Catherine is obviously looks like a cat. She's Amato, but she works within the bar of the restaurant that's below where their odd jobs is on the second floor. And of course, the woman over here is also a major player within Gintama, and she's the person that takes the rent money from Gintoki. And every time he refused to pay up, she basically says she's going to kick them out, but she never does. Is because even as much as he hates Gintoki, she knows that what Gintoki is trying to do is to ensure the safety of the Japanese people within the district that she's in, from Amato oppression. She never admits this, but she knows that what he's doing is an honorable deed. So she kind of maybe she lost a son in the past and considers Gintoki to be like a son, but she never openly says it to him. So she kind of let him do what he wants to do. But at the same time, she always demands rent. And I believe she does kick him out every now and again, but then he comes back to pay rent. So that moving forward from that, we get to see more episodes passed on within Gintama, where we see Katsura and Elizabeth show up to a party to some mascot event. And I believe this was the episode that we first get to learn that Elizabeth wasn't a person. So I believe during the mascot arc, or I believe it was called the mascot arc or something like that, which was like a fan con. Katsura dressed up like a pirate. Elizabeth was with him. They had this little argument back and forth between Gintoki and within the other people of Gintoki's odd jobs. They both got into this little argument and tussle. Eventually, we get to see that there was a dude hiding inside of Elizabeth's body and saying that how he's tired and he's exhausted from running. and he has to get out. Shocked by this, by I believe Gintoki and Katsura and Kagura and everyone are flipping out because they said there was someone inside of, who is that inside of Elizabeth? There's this entity hiding inside Elizabeth. It's so goofy and it's so stupid, and it makes sense that they would think that it's an entity hiding inside Elizabeth, when anyone who has common sense will know that this dude is simply just wearing a mascot outfit, and he's just overheating. However, the anime does shows that Gintama and Katsura and the others are this stupid. They're basically slow in the head. So they think it's something weird, and then it cuts to a scene where it does its own WandaVision thing and completely like mind wipes anything that they remember from before. Goes into the next episode, didn't even address it, and we get to see at the beginning of that next episode a music video promotion within the anime about the character Otosu. So the anime itself is promoting a music video for the character that's within the show, to the characters, to the television of the show, to you, the audience, as well. So the promotion of the music video is for you, the viewing audience, and it's also a promotion of the music video for the people inside of the world of the anime. Now, whether Otosu's music video actually was real or not, in Japan, and you could actually buy the music from this fictional character in the Gintama world in a store, that I don't know. But that would be more than just breaking fourth wall here. That would be like, this makes no sense. This released music video was only for the people who are fanboys inside of the anime of this character. It wasn't really meant for you to be something you can actually purchase from a store. So who knows, maybe it was. Moving on from that, we get to learn that Otosu has a father, and his father escaped prison to go back to see his daughter's concert. We get to finally get the capture of the guy who's been stalking Otosu. Find out that this guy wasn't really a stalker. Well, actually, he was really a stalker, but he wasn't a murderer or anything. He was just a fanboy, just like everyone else. And that his skin, his black skin, they're trying to show that he's nefarious and he's an evil person. His black skin is actually the texture of his skin. He was born with pitch black skin, so he's not really hiding in the shadows. He's just dark. He's not really ominous. His skin is just black, like pitch black, because he was born that way. I believe he was an Amato, and Gintoki and other people from the Odd Jobs crew just didn't know that. They assumed that he was evil. Yeah, it's hilarious. So eventually Shinpachi goes in to kick the guy's ass for the person who was talking shit about Otosu, who said Otosu doesn't know how to act and everything, and Shinpachi gets upset about this. And this all happens within one episode. The crazy guy here, the guy who's an actor talking shit about Otosu there, that she should stay in making music and don't try to be an actor, all the way to the next episode. So that was over, and this is the beginning of where I'm probably going to laugh a lot. So everything that I said before at the very beginning of this rundown of Gintama was simply to introduce you to various different characters and the world and the fourth wall breaking that is Gintama and its ridiculous nature. From there, I'm moving on, and this is the part of the video where it's possible that I'm going to be laughing a lot, because every one of the episodes that are going to be popping up, or every episode based on what was funny to me, is going to be reflected here. So I'm only going to pick the episodes I remember that were funny to me, in order to sell what Gintama actually is and why it's in the top 5. So this episode is an infiltration episode by a guy named well, I can't remember. I don't remember his name. What is his name? Yeah, I just had it on the tip of my tongue and I completely forget it. Miyazaki, no. Um, Mizuki, no. Um, Myra, no. Don't remember. I can't believe I don't remember this dude's name. He has a very famous name. I don't remember his name. He even has an annoying voice that comes with his name. I'll remember his name. That kind of pisses me off. I don't remember his name. All right, moving on from that, we get to go to this place, and it's not really important his name. It's more like the importance of the episode itself. And the hilarity of this episode starts with him being infiltrating uh, a yakuza possibly terrorist organization trying to bring down Japan, or trying to invade Japan, um, or try to take out the Amatos that are in charge. More like these are people who are considered terrorists, and the Shinsengumi got wind of them, send in one of their operatives in order um, to see if what they were actually building within this factory is real. He shows up to the party. He pretends to be one of their fellow workers. Met the manager. The manager says, "Well, you will have to build these things called justaways, and they're like miniature little toys, and they have sticks on their arms, and they have eyes on their bodies, and their bodies are red in color, and they look like cylinders, basically cylinders with sticks and eyes." And he basically say, "This is not really a toy. It's just an object that's rectangular, um, with sticks for arms and little eyes on it. And he called them a justaway." And he said, "What the hell is a justaway anyway? It doesn't even look like it's a toy. It looks like something completely ridiculous." Um, Moving on from that, he points to the justaway. He says, "I cannot stand looking at this thing. It looks like something that a kid just came out straight out the womb and just decided as a baby to decide to put like two sticks in the arm of something that's rectangular and pop two eyes on top of it. You don't even need to be creative and a genius to make something like this, you know." Um, the guy says, "Well, this is what we're building here. They're called justaways, and they're essential for the function of the new toy line." And he's basically getting pissed off about the um, damn, I can't remember his name. Yamazaki. That's his name. Yamazaki. Is that really his name? Yeah, it's not Yamazaki. So Yamazaki. Now I remember it. His name is Yamazaki, or something close to that name. So Yamazaki basically say, "Well, I'm piecing out," and eventually he meets Gintoki at the factory, mass-produced line factory, who's creating one of these toys or creating many of them, and he's the fastest mass-produced just away employee there, who's going to be promoted to manager because he's so fast. He's able to make them in just a few seconds. And of course, Yamazaki basically say, "Well, this place is going to go to hell if management material is simply based on who's faster at making these crazy looking things to begin with." So it gets even funnier when um, the leader of the Shinsengumi, who's in charge of everyone within the Shinsengumi army, the police force of the Shinsengumi, shows up to the party. He has memory loss from his last battle, um, and he's at the mass-produced Just Away factory as well. And he decided he wanted to be the best mass-produced Just Away. And of course, Yamazaki says, "Oh, okay, I'm calling it in. I found my idiot boss, and he's trying to be a mass-produced Just Away, Titan." And even the Just Aways start to cry. You know, it's completely ridiculous because the Just Aways are just toys, but the anime try to put it off like the toys are emotional about Kondo, that was his name. Kondo not being able to become a just away master. It's ridiculous. Eventually, Yamazaki gets cornered by the bad guy. The bad guy put the sword to Yamazaki's throat, just like in the manga. So another beautiful thing about Gintama is that it follows also the manga in certain images to a T, because those were the most hilarious part and the most memorable part of the manga. So he puts the sword to the throat of Yamazaki. Kondo and Gintoki both have memory loss, so they don't know what to do, but they eventually stop him. And then Kagura and the rest of the Shinsengumi show up. Hijikata, Okita, and Shinpachi show up, and the bad guy basically say, "Well, I'm going to kick your ass for even showing up to try to rescue these guys. They're going to be my very first sacrifice. As an example, I'm going to make an example of these people to be the very first sacrifice for the revolution of us ruling over Japan and taking down the old regime or something like that." So yeah, I'm going to kick you guys ass by taking out your own personal people. Kagura, being not somewhat bright in the head either, say, "How can you kick our ass if we're going to kick your ass?" And the bad guy, now getting into the whole ass kickery of argument, basically say, "Well, you can't kick my ass if I'm the first person to kick ass. So I'm the progenitor of kicking ass. I'm ass kicker prime." And you basically, Kagura basically say, "Well, well, I'm the person who will kick the ass of ass kicking." So the moment I first mentioned the word ass kicking, that means I am the. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Moving on from that, they get to rescue Gintoki. Eventually, something falls on his head after the whole factory exploded. I guess the explosion of the factory made his mind come back, or his hit on his head made his memory come back. He remembered who he was. The bad guy gets taken out. Shinpachi and Kagura joins Gintoki again, and Odd Jobs is full swing again. Their leader is back in business. On to the next scene, which is another personal favorite of mine's. Um, it's the most ridiculous thing ever. It this is There were funny parts in Gintama, and then there's things that just didn't make sense in Gintama. This is one of those things that just did not make sense to me in Gintama. But it didn't make sense to the point that it was a funny didn't make sense. It was an annoying didn't make sense. So as the episodes of Gintama kept climbing and climbing and climbing, the ridiculous and funniness and hilarity of the Gintama just kept climbing as well. So every time you get past one arc, you get to a more ridiculous arc that came down the road. So this arc is the art of catching the silver fox, or catching the fox. And this is also the arc of hard boil. You could basically call this the hard boil arc. And why I call this the hard boil arc is because this guy is supposed to be behaving like he's a hard boiled police officer, a hard boiled detective, kind of like a Chow Yun Fat's movie, where where Chow Yun Fat is the hard boiled detective, in a movie called Hard Boil. So the name of that movie was a movie that starred Chow Yun Fat as the hard boiled cop. So basically, a hard boiled cop is supposed to be someone who's a badass, that doesn't give a shit, doesn't follow the rules, and is willing to get the job done and get the job done all the time. But he does it in a cool way. If it's not a cool way, he cannot really consider hard boiled. You can't consider John McClane to be hard boiled because he's not doing it in a cool way or in a way that's so hard boiled and awesome. It's cool. It has to be something that the guy is doing it cool while at the same time doing it. He's taking injuries, but he's doing it in a cool way. So this this guy is not hard boiled at all, but he thinks he is. So the anime starts with his image, just like I'm talking here. It goes on for a full 5 minutes. A full 5 minutes. His image is shown for a full 5 minutes of someone talking. So you're saying to yourself, "Like, when the hell is this anime going to start?" So every now and again, it cuts back from his image to another image, of people talking, no actual real animation, and you hear a voice within these various different images. And in this image, he's sleeping with a teddy bear in his bed, And then the episode ends and it goes back to this image of him smoking a cigarette with a gun in his hand and in black and white. And then it goes back to another image, and then it goes back to this image again for a full 5 minutes. It makes no sense. It's crazy. It's bizarre. And you're asking yourself, is this really Gintama? And then finally Gintama, or should I say Gintoki, shows up to the party. And the anime finally starts after a full 5 minutes of dialogue that made no sense whatsoever. Welcome to Gintama, the anime of nothing making sense. So, if you really want that type of hilarity, be like, what the hell am I watching? Like, and then all of a sudden it just goes into a comedy fest. Be like, okay, I see what type of comedy this is. So, his boss decided to drop kick him, yeah, drop kick him on the head, and says, "Cut your hardboiled bullshit over. I'm tired of this hardboiled nonsense. What are you hardboiled off? You know, like you're incompetent at your job. You can hardly get your job done. Every time you go after the bad guy, the terrorist called the fox, or the murderer called the fox, you always mess it up. Every time you're talking to me, you're always using the word hardboiled." Every time he's talking to his boss, he's always using the word hard boiled in his sentence. Like he can't not talk about, say something that I'm going to go and investigate and do stakeout, but he always have to include hard boil in everything he does. Be like, okay, um, hard day's work is over, so I have to do something hard boil with regards to putting my feet up and relaxing. But I have to, before I do that, I must hardboil get into my car. And he says, enough already. I'm losing my mind with this hardboiled nonsense. So we go into another episode where Gintoki says, you know what? I have enough of this nonsense as well. The fourth wall get broken. Gintoki took the image of the word popping up onto the screen of hardboiled, of everything being in black and white, and says, I don't want any more black and white, North style hardboiled cop detective thing. Slaps him on the head with the black and white image, and then color comes back into the anime of Gintama. It was going back and forth anyway, and he said, "You say enough of this hardboiled crap." It's like, we just have to get this job done. It's like, you're annoying. I could see why your boss hates your ass. Be like, I don't know what's your problem. And then I just put my head in my hand and I just start chuckling under my shirt, like. And then I just looked at the anime again and say, what the hell is wrong with this anime? This dude just shows up on a stakeout, on a motorcycle, on a stakeout, on a motorcycle, wearing a robe that he just got out the shower with. And then it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. He whips out a large, snifter. He not a small one, a large one, and has wine in his hands. Like his day is completed. Like he's finished the job. He's just going to relax. But he's showing up to a stakeout. Gintoki is saying, like, I'm tired of this shit. Like, you're the most insane person in the world. Like, who shows up to a stakeout in a bathrobe? So the next scene happens. It's so ridiculous. The bad guy basically saves Mr. Hardboil. What was his name? Kichi, something like that. I think AG was his name. Yeah, AG. Yeah. Save AG, and then apparently the fox says, "You know what? I'm getting tired of this. There's something wrong with you as well." So everyone knows that there's something wrong with AG, and the bad guy basically say, "I give up. I'm gonna throw myself into this fire so I don't have to deal with you anymore." Apparently that didn't happen, but the story continues. The bad guy, the fox, is very much alive, but at that end scene, it basically between AG and the fox, they come to terms and they both realize who each other are, and they continue up their charade. So Eiji now knows who the Fox's real identity is. The Fox now knows that Heiji knows who he is, but they continue the charade in the bar of them not knowing who each other is, simply based on nostalgia and the fact that the Fox had saved Eiji when he was younger. So moving on from that, we go into another ridiculous territory of pure insanity and hilarity, and it's probably even more funny and more ridiculous than Eiji's little hard-boiled arc. And in fact, I know it is. And this is a personal favorite of mine. Kind of like Eiji's one, a hard-boiled detective, but this one is a personal favorite of mine. It's not the personal favorite of mine. I believe the Shogun one was the personal favorite of mine with the barbershop arc was my personal favorite, where the Shogun was taking a haircut and his eyes was all he had olives on his eyes that looked like Sharingans. In fact, even the anime of Gintoki basically says, "Why does his the eye patch look like he has Sharingans?" So, Gintama, I will say this right now, Gintama reference other animes as well. American animes, movies, live action movies. Everything in Gintama can be fourth wall broken or extend past fourth wall breaking into realms that aren't locked into fourth wall, are trying to extend and break the boundaries of fourth wall to go into fifth wall. This is the next episode, or should I say, this is the next story I remember to be extremely hilarious within Gintama, and this is the story of Prison Arc. And the prison arc is also a very funny one because Katsura, Zura, the terrorist, part of the old crew that Gintama used to hang with when they were kids, gets locked up in prison after getting captured. He technically really didn't. He allowed himself to get captured, or maybe he really did get captured, but then he escaped. Not exactly sure how that went. I believe he really got captured, but he was pretending that the government couldn't possibly capture him. So he's that unaware of his own incompetence sometimes. So he gets captured, and Katsura gets put in prison, and the guy he gets put in prison next to is this gentleman right here. And this gentleman basically freaks out when he sees Katsura there, because he had every intention of escaping that very same day when Katsura showed up to the prison to right in a prison cell right across from him. So he was planning on escaping on the very day that Katsura got put in prison. So he basically said, Nande, how all of a sudden there's a guy right across from me. And for days, I believe maybe even up to a month, there was no one across from me, giving me enough time to dig myself out of this prison and escape into freedom. I had everything prepared and calculated accurately, and now all of a sudden, there's a dude right across from my prison cell from me. So, moving on from that, we get to see this guy's accurate layout and plan. He considered every variable and how he was going to escape. He knew exactly what time the guards move, what time the prisoners were in prison, when the lights go out, the whole 9 yards. But he couldn't calculate Katsura being in the prison cell right across from him. All of a sudden, he decided once night came, he was going to escape. Once Katsura falls asleep, he's not going to wait anymore. He's going to try to escape once Katsura falls asleep. Turns out Katsura, he has this feeling that someone's watching him, and he thinks Katsura is the person that's watching him. Like this devil is watching, or this demon is watching him over his shoulder. So he turns around and he turns around and he sees Katsura sleeping, not looking at him, sleeping in the crouching start position. Like you go in the crouch position for a run, and it says on your mark. He's sleeping in the mark position of crouching to do a run, and this guy is fully passed out, fully asleep in the crouch position. You say who goes to sleep in the crouch position, my dude? That doesn't make sense. Like this is Gintama. Welcome to Gintama. The guy does not get any sleep. He has bloodshot eyes. He has to now think of a different plan in order to escape the prison. So he devised this little Uno thing of counting sheep, or he decided to use Uno and counting sheep in order for Katsura to fall asleep because Katsura can't fall asleep. So he tells Katsura to count sheep. Katsura starts to count sheep that very night, the very next day of that night. So when Katsura started to count sheep at midnight or something like that, all of a sudden at the 13th sheep, Katsura decides to stop counting and create this extremely long story based on the number 13. He said, well, 13 is strange to me. I remember when there was this girl that was part of my basketball team. Katsura has no basketball team. He was never the coach of a basketball team, but this is all being made up in his head because Zura is kind of crazy. So he was part of this basketball team, or he created this fictional story of this basketball team, girls basketball team. He's the coach of this girls basketball team, and one of the girl got sick from cancer or something like that, or some type of illness, dies, and her friend who was next to her, who was her opponent on the team, that they got along and they were childhood friends or something, decides she's going to win the game for her friend who's sick, who's about to die from this illness. So she ran back to Katsura before the game's about to start, the short hair girl, and about to put on the uniform and did that layup, that final layup to win the game, wearing shirt 13 for the girl. And it's during this period that, after this long dialogue of this miniature story that Katsura created, the prisoner basically realized he was duped, and the whole time he was listening to this story, completely forgot that he told Katsura he just wanted him to count sheep until he falls asleep. So he's now pissed off. He's now pissed off again that he was duped, and he was saying that was the longest story I've ever heard of counting from number 13 to number 14. Like this, there was this huge gap from the 13th sheep to the 14th sheep. Moving on from that, he has to decide to find ways to get out of prison by using a gang member or a murderer in order to stop Zura. Unfortunately, that doesn't work out for this guy. And this guy named Sachi, who's a mass murderer or something like that, or a theft or whatever his crime is, piracy, whatever. He's the biggest, baddest in the prison. So he goes up to, or should I say, this guy shows up to the party, and he sees Katsura, and then Katsura basically insults the guy's shirt that he was wearing in prison, his zigzag shirt. Basically, he rips off the sleeve of his shirt just to show his muscles, that how much is a badass he is. While everyone's keeping their shirt on, he's the only one that has torn off shirt. Katsura says, "Will someone rip off your shirt? You have nothing but zigzags on your shirt." He basically says this is a fashion statement. Moving on from that, we see Sachi all of a sudden become sensitive because someone's pointed out the zigzags on his cut-off shirt that he ripped off of himself. The guy basically say how sensitive is the biggest criminal in the prison becoming extremely sensitive, sensitive that someone has identified his zigzags on his shirt. It makes no goddamn sense. So we're moving on from that. The guy is now getting extremely pissed off and trying to devise ways of how to escape by sabotaging Zura. Zura turns out to be the boss of the prison eventually. After what happened with Sachi, everyone's following Zura. They all are standing behind Zura like Zura is the leader of the entire prison now. Even the guards respect Zura. The guy's basically saying, how the hell did it get to this, that this random dude all of a sudden have the respect of everyone? So coming towards the end of this episode, or should I say end of the prison arc, it really wasn't like an arc. It was just one episode. So that's why, actually, let me take that back. It wasn't a prison arc. It was an episode. Kind of felt like an arc, but it was an episode. So at the end, Zura basically said, "You know what? This guy is finally asleep. The whole time, this guy was trying to get Zura to go to sleep. Zura, Katsura, was trying to get him to go to sleep. So when Katsura was in crouching start position and all this other stuff he was doing, and these 13 sheep, it was all pretend. So even the animation, the people who created the anime were fooling the audience who was reading this. Like if you were to read this manga and you first purchased it in Japan and read about this whole story that happened in Gintama, it was simply a blind from the beginning. It was simply meant to fool the audience. And this was the first example of the top tier, top shelf level of blind within a story that existed within anime. Because I was completely fooled that the whole time when he was in crouching start sleeping position, that this dude was actually sleeping. I didn't believe he was actually sleeping, but the anime never stated that he wasn't sleeping. And the many times when he was trying to count sheep and he couldn't sleep, I started to believe, well, maybe Zura can't really go to sleep. And maybe all these issues with Zura trying to go to sleep and this guy trying to get Zura to go to sleep um, was fake from the beginning. Is Zura actually trying to fool this guy? Now, here's the thing. You only get to realize that Zura was messing with this guy from the very beginning. But anime does it so the blind so well that anime force you to in a way to believe that maybe Zura can't go to sleep. So it was a blind that was done masterfully. You always knew that Zura was up to something, but you never knew exactly what it was until the very end. So unless you actually saw this when it originally came out, or read the manga when it originally came out, it was meant to show that Katsura was up to something from the beginning. Everyone knew that. Even I knew that. But we didn't know what that something was. So we automatically assumed that the sleeping was part of his actual problem. But we knew that some way Katsura was going to get out. He just didn't know how. So at the end of the anime, it shows how he was able to get out. That the whole thing from the beginning of everything that has to do with sleeping was simply to fool the audience and to fool the character that was right across from him, that he was trying to escape. Katsura was trying to escape as well. So the next scene that happens shows that someone is actually looking over Katsura's shoulder. And Katsura is surprised by this because he thought the only person he had to worry about was the guy that was right across from him. Turns out that's not the case. At the very end of this episode, someone else was looking at Katsura the whole time. Katsura fell to the ground, and it turns out Sachi was looking at Katsura the whole time, every time he was awake. So while the guy was worried about Zura actually looking at him while he was sleeping, someone was looking at Katsura to see if when Katsura is going to go to sleep. And that guy, Sachi, eventually saw someone looking at him, and it turns out that it was this dude who was looking over Sachi to see if Sachi was looking at him, because he automatically assumed Sachi was never going to go to sleep because Sachi was watching him. What basically the end of the anime shows is that all the different people in the prison, from every single person we've seen in this prison, who's a prisoner, was trying to escape the prisoner. Was trying to escape the prison, and they were all looking at the next guy, at the next guy, at the next guy, close to their prison to see while they were trying to personally break out. So all these dudes were trying to break out of prison from the very beginning. Not a single one of them was trying to stay in prison. They all had the same idea that the original guy had, and the original guy thought the whole time that he was the only person that was trying to break out of prison, because we, the audience, was never given context of how many people had the same idea as him. So it was the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. It's like, this is crazy. All these mofos had the same idea the whole time, and this dude is so worried about Katsura catching him escaping. But it turns out every single one of them, including Zura, had the idea of escaping the whole time. So this is a memorable and historic episode of Gintama. The next one was also a memorable and historic episode of Gintama. Moves to the section where we get to see this guy does his little thing, or three musical performers do their little thing on a talk show. And I'm not sure exactly how it goes. Something like that. Some type of music. Um, they do their little spiel. Shows up. This is the beginning of the Otosu Arc, the musician. Yes, like I said before, she's a major player within the Gintama world. She'll eventually show up during her arc. This is the Otosu Arc, and during the Otosu Arc, which is a competition in order to get exclusive stuff from Otosu, including to be considered her number one fan, and to get all the rights and privileges and VIP stuff from her. Everyone wanted going or losing their shit just to try to be the number one fan of Otosu. So it turns out that was also an Hijikata was also an Otosu fan, and he decided to create this shy boy alternate persona of his. This persona that represents a character that he created, his fandom, his, or should I say, his fanboy persona. So he created this persona of this character called the Shy Boy. He wears glasses, has a bandana, has a jacket on, and he has his own private little small army. Eventually, he managed to get the Shinsengumi pulled into this craziness of his own personal fandom, and the Shinsengumi are looking at him like, "What the hell's wrong with you, dude?" Eventually, Shinsengumi got caught up in it and eventually became obsessed with it themselves. Okita showed up to the party in a damn car and everything. Runs over one of Shinpachi's fellow mates during this huge battle, this fandom battle. And it's another, I guess you say this whole anime is also another fourth wall breaking. Well, not so much a fourth wall breaking, more like a emphasis on what fandom is. Fandom is typically people who are above a certain age that they can't let go of certain things. That becomes an obsession that they consider it to be almost as real as life itself. This is true for many anime and many manga fans. Sometimes they're so attached to something that it becomes a life of their own. Because many of these people who are in these fandoms come from different arcs of life, different jobs in life, simply to do something that's completely different than what it is that they do in their real life that's cringy, or should I say soul crushing. This is why I say anime is essential to the existence of humankind, just like LARPing is essential to the existence of humankind. Because without LARPing, a form of entertainment in order for a person to be happy would not be able to exist, and that person would eventually become, some type of psychopath killer or commit crimes, and who knows the type of atrocious things people would do if they didn't have an outlet. LARPing is a great outlet. You could basically say fandom or fancon or cosplay is LARPing, but the LARPing only starts when they're creating a story, a campaign, something for them to work towards, part of a journey that's testimony of various arc within a campaign. So that's the difference between LARPing and just cosplay. It's a journey of a campaign, so to speak. So yeah, these guys start to battle each other. Shy boy armies exist. They all follow Hijikata. Some of them are Shinsengumi. Some of them are regular fanboys of Otosu. Some of them want to take on Shinpachi's own private army. Shinpachi has his own private army of fanboys. Gintoki says, "What the hell is going on?" Because Gintoki is like every other random guy. Be like, "I don't understand cosplay." That's who Gintoki basically is saying. Who Gintoki is. He's a samurai, and all of a sudden, if you drop cosplay in front of him, be like, "What the hell is wrong with you people? There's something mentally wrong with you people." So that's who Gintoki is when it comes to cosplay. Eventually, turns out that that's not the case. That Gintoki is 100% into cosplay. It's just that how, if you drop the word money in front of him, in order to pay rent and to foot his bill for the next month or two, He's willing to accept fandom as the new saving grace, the new messiah, just so he could pay that rent. I don't know, man. It's completely crazy. So this is also the first introduction of, or maybe the second introduction of, where the creators, the anime, or should I say the manga creators, decide to break out of fourth wall and go into fourth wall 4.5 or fifth wall. So what I'm saying with regards to this, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna say hopefully someone could explain this to me, or if not, you don't really have to. The fourth and the fifth wall. So fourth wall was broken during this period when Gintoki was reading the manga of his existence within the anime called Gintama, given by the creators of the manga. So this image here is the image of the animator, or the animation of Gintama, looking at his own self in the same form in a manga. So he picks up a manga and watch himself in the same position here reading what's going on. And this is the first time we see Gintama actually address his manga form from his anime form. But if you were to read the manga, when the manga originally came out, before the anime of Gintama came out, it would be the manga looking at itself. So it would be fourth wall breaking, but at the same time, it's addressing that it knows exists, and it's addressing that it knows the creators, allowing it to exist, and it also addressing the fact that future episodes of Gintama is willing to tell the audience future episodes of Gintama through the manga itself, which the character basically say, this is what's going to happen later on during the Otosu arc, or when certain ratings and certain television shows goes off the line. So, this is why I'm trying to say fourth wall breaking doesn't completely apply to this scenario, because it's not just about the character addressing the audience, but the characters actually, or should I say the character itself, is addressing himself as well within his own genre, within his own world. So it's not just about breaking, knowing that he's a fictional character to the audience, but he knows that he's also a fictional character to himself, of himself. So he's addressing not just his fictionalness within by looking at a manga of himself. He's addressing the fictional stuff of the character looking at the manga to the character in the manga, knowing also that he's fictional. So it's not completely fourth wall breaking when the manga that he's reading, that's also a manga, knows also that it's fictitious. So it's kind of like Inception in a way. It's not just simply about you having a nightmare and then you being in a nightmare of a nightmare. It's more like you being a nightmare of a nightmare, knowing full well that you know that both of those two nightmares aren't the real thing. So it's more like three nightmares. So that's why I'm saying it's not completely fourth wall breaking. It's fourth wall breaking, and it's a different deviation of fourth wall breaking. If it's not fifth wall, it's fourth wall with other additional factors to itself that's driving it from that fourth wall breaking characteristics close towards the boundaries of fifth wall. So if you don't fully consider it fifth wall, this is definitely 4.5. So moving on from that, we get to see another crew member of Shinpachi's little posse, who are trying to win the whole Otosu contest and everything. Um, I forgot his name. Yamazaki. No, that Yamazaki someone else. Yamcha or something like that. So they all wear Shinpachi's combat uniform, which is blue with white stripes, to show that they're part of their gang. And then Gintama, knowing that he's going to get paid, is there right now. And then of course, Shinpachi's personal friend, from when he's young, grabs Gintama by the shirt and say, "What the f is wrong with you?" And like, we're taking this shit seriously. We know it's fandom, but it's part of our bloodline. It's part of what makes us who we are. Like, you have no right, you piece of shit. And he's telling all this to Gintoki, and Gintoki says, well, you know what? Um, get your hands off me, otherwise I'll remove those little two teeth that's right in front of your face. Um, and you'll walk around with no teeth in front of your face anymore. He basically said, go ahead, remove my two buck teeth. I will look beautiful after that. People have been making fun of me my entire life because of my two buck teeth. By you removing my two buck teeth, I'm going to look beautiful. So you're not making me look ugly by removing my teeth. You're actually making me look beautiful. It's another hilarious moment within Gintama. Eventually, he gets run over by Okita, who's wearing Mr. Shy Boy's outfit for Hijikata, and gets completely knocked out. They have to pull him along the way. Unfortunately, they both find out, based on the rules of the whole contest, is that you have to have all your players, all four people that are part of your team, or three people that are part of your team, be conscious, and all three must cross the finish line together in order to acquire the leadership role within the contest. Because this is the first phase of the Otosu Arc, which is you must run in a running competition and beat your enemies in the process and get to the finish line together as a group. Unfortunately, this guy is completely unconscious, so they have to pull him on the way. Eventually, Yamazaki show up to the party. Yamazaki basically say, well, that dude's unconscious. He's fully unconscious. I can basically see he's unconscious. You guys aren't going to win. So Gintoki, in fears of Yamazaki going and telling Hijikata, decide to recruit a wrestler, a foreign wrestler, and pay him in, not in currency, in amount of white loaf of bread. So he's going to give him like a huge bounty of nothing but white loaf of bread. Yamazaki says, "What the hell is going on? Like, who in their right mind will pay someone with French bread? Who would accept being paid in French bread to do this contest? By the way, since when does someone who is said to be one of your teammates ever turns and metamorphosizes into a giant-sized wrestler type dude? That's definitely not the same person that was with you." So it became this huge, hilarious little moment within Gintama, where the guy looked like Hulk Hogan and is basically on the team. And Gintoki is like completely serious about this and completely wacky about it. I believe, I believe Yamazaki might be the only person within all of Gintama that has some type of common sense, more than even Shinpachi himself. I believe Yamazaki represents the eyes and ears of the audience, of things that are completely goofy and wild and crazy, in order to make some type of logical sense out of it. But at the same time, Yamazaki comes across as the dude that you will always have to, give the bitch work to, because you don't want to do it yourself. Moving on from that, we get to go to the next scene where our Hogan character says, "Time is money. We need to accomplish a goal, and I need to get all my French bread when I need to." Moving on from that, they get to have this little hopscotch little scene between Gintoki and Takatin. I believe that was his name, Takatin. It's hilarious. The whole Otosu arc is ridiculous and hilarious. Moving on from that, we get to go into more serious territories. So, what I was saying before with regards to what Gintama is. Gintama is ridiculous. Gintama is humorous. Gintama is off the wall. Gintama is crazy. Gintama makes no sense. Gintama can turn you off at the same time. Gintama is like a living slapstick of nothing but different episodes of hilarity. Sometimes people say, well, that's a turnoff because it means it doesn't have a story that's consistently following, a campaign that's consistently following from beginning to middle to end. Turns out that's not the case. The seriousness that is Gintama was always there since episode 1. The anime never really focused on those things. It went straight for the odd job. So when the time did come for the arrival of the seriousness in Gintama, you drastically saw that shift from the mood of what Gintama was to the mood of what Gintama became. That said, this is a representation of it. This is Kagura when she was young, and this is Kagura's brother, who I believe is Kamui. That was his name. And it's now said that Kagura is of the Yato clan, or the Yato people. And the Yato people are a type of Amatos from space. So Kagura was never human to begin with. She's of a species that look completely human in every way, shape, and form, but their abilities and their blood within their body is not human. It may look red, same color, but if you check the DNA, if you were to take blood from these people, you could see that within their DNA chromosomes is a hell of a lot more than 24 chromosomes. So these people were never completely human to begin with. The Yato people. And Kamui showing up is a huge representation of mood shift from what Gintama was to what Gintama is. How I say this, because the seriousness of Gintama, once Kamui showed up, initiate the Flames arc. And the Flames arc was the first time that the mood of Gintama went from let's play nice to Death Note type of seriousness. And during the Flames arc, we get to see Kamui attack Kagura, tells Kagura, you're in the way, you should go back home to our father. I am now an assassin. I'm sent here to kill anyone who's in the way of my boss. And you're going to die if you stay with Gintoki. So he literally attacks his sister, almost killing her, but eventually she managed to survive. And it's also during this process of the Flames arc did we get to see other people of the Yato clan. Certain people who were recruited by the Yato, who are not of Yato blood, humans, and others who were of Yato blood, who are part of the Yato clan. This guy here isn't 100% Yato. He's more human, but he has the strength of a Yato. Eventually, Shinpachi gets KO'd, slammed to the ceiling. Kagura gets stepped on by this guy who's part of the Yato clan. In order to roll with the Yatos, you have to have berserk strength. I mean, you have to have Steve Rot. Each person on the Yato crew have to be like a Captain America type. No one who's part of the Yato clan can be weak. Everyone has to be super strong. That is the prerequisite to be Yato. Strength flows within their blood. They're born from strength. They're naturally strong people. And if you naturally don't come from that bloodline, you're trained in order to be superiorly strong. If you're not originally Yato, you're trained by Yato. So he kicks Kagura's ass. He kicks Shinpachi's ass. Eventually, Kagura initiate her bloodlust, and it's something Kagura has been fighting against for her entire life, to not initiate that bloodlust. Kagura goes crazy after she realized Shinpachi, her personal friend, was going to die. Her bloodlust comes out. She knocks the guy cold clock, knocks him out. Doesn't exactly kill him, but his arm was lost in the process. He almost bleeds to death. We get to see another boss of this area. And this guy, who is not Yato, was also trained by Yato, used the Yato weapon. Now, the Yato weapon, how you know the difference between a regular fighter or a samurai or a foreigner or other Yamatos, what makes Yatos different from other fighters within the Gintama world is that all Yato fighters, or those who have trained in the Yato way, carry a giant umbrella. And giant umbrellas, or medium-sized umbrellas, are umbrellas made of complete iron and steel. They're not regular umbrellas. I believe the texture of the cloth on the umbrella is probably reinforced fiber, or reinforced polyurethane, and the different spokes on the umbrella are made of solid steel, and the base of the umbrella, which is the the shaft of the umbrella, all the way to the tip, is made of a type of metal that's harder than steel and heavier than steel. It's basically like if you were to pick up you know, the center bar on a weightlifting bar of a type of bar that's able to lift up more than 100 pounds, no, more than 200 pounds. If you have a 100-pound weight on one side of a bar and a 100-pound weight on the other side of a bar, it has to be a bar that's strong enough to be able to hold that type of weight. Or not even, let's say if the bar is only able to hold 50 pounds on one end and 50 pounds on the other, the bar will have to be able to be strong enough to not only hold it, but be able to stay at its consistent rate for years and years and decades to come and still stay strong. So that's basically what the bar is that he's wheeling over his head so easily as the shaft on the umbrella. It's the strength level of that bar to be able to wield it with one arm. Now, if you're able to wield something like that, like the bar of a barbell that contains barbells on it, that easily with one arm, and you're freakishly strong just to swing that around with one arm. You're not normal in strength. You're able to move that around like it's nothing. Uh, People in the ancient past, or should I say, most people of the ancient past, when swords were ridiculous size during Greek invasions of certain lands, or during the Peloponnesian War or various different Persian wars, their swords were also considered to be, even Middle Ages, the swords that were used during those periods were considered to be extremely heavy. Heavy, they were each equal to about 100 pounds or possibly more. So even though men did wield those swords with both arms, consider the fact that if a man could wield that type of sword that's more than 100 pounds with one arm, that person will be extremely strong to begin with. So this dude is massively strong. So when he fought Gintoki, Gintoki got his ass kicked easily, until the end when Gintoki realized he had to use every single trick in the book in order to beat this guy. Otherwise, he was going to get murdered. So he beat this guy simply because he pushed his body to a level that his bones broke in his body, his arms broke, and he had blood loss, and he had internal bleedings, and his chest was ruptured. So Gintama or Gintoki was had near death fighting the boss of Urikawa Flames Arc or something like that. So after defeating this guy and able to show the light of the sun to everyone, because their little Kabukicho area was underground, he got defeated. The next bad guy in the arc was the Red Spider arc, which was someone who's also very strong, which was part of an arc that was very considered to be very serious as well. Moving on from that, we get to see the battle with them. They had the little duke out, those little competition. Moving on from that, we get to see Gintama take him out easier than he did the other guy out. Moving on from that, we get to see context with regards to Gintoki's past. So the hilarity of Gintama kind of took like a back step and a side step, and before it got to this point, and took a rest period so that the serious nature of Gintama could be flourished and blossom. So now we're into the serious section of Gintama, and this is Gintama's more serious section of the arc of Gintama's past. The Courtesan arc was the first of many arcs to come later down the road to initiate the transitional point from what was Gintama 2015 to Gintama 2017. So once it became Gintama 2015, it was the first period, that introduction of the Courtesan arc, to show Gintama's or Gintoki's past, to show Zura's past, to show Tusgaru's past, or Shinsuke, if you want to call him that, past. So we get to see the guy. I don't remember his name. I think his name was Kyono or something like that, or Hyoyo or something. I don't remember. But he was the person that was like a surrogate father to Gintoki when he was young. He raised a lot of orphans, taught them the ways of the samurai and how to stand up against oppression. Eventually, he was a revolutionist and he fought against Amatos when they invaded the planet. Eventually, he got captured. Eventually, he got killed. And since then, Gintama has been in furious feud with the Yamato since the death of his master. So that's why Gintoki has always had this chip on his shoulder. Why he's always had this thing against the Amatos. Because they are the ones that were responsible for the death of his master. He gets Gintoki then gets into fight with during the Courtesan arc with this guy called Oboro, and Oboro is basically a servant to a dictator type who's serving the Amato. So this guy just wants to become rich and powerful and take over everything that the shogun has done. He wants to overrule the shogun of Japan, who's keeping things in peace relations between the Amato and within the humans. But he wants to kill the shogun in order to make the Amato fully control Japan on the down low. And he used Oboro, this assassin, in order to do so. So Gintoki is not gonna stand for that. Say, hell no, that's never gonna happen, you piece of shit. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill the people who were responsible for my master's death. And Oboro, who was there during the time of his master's death, Gintoki sees him and say, I remember you, you bastard. You're basically a government lackey. So Gintoki's old enough now to fight this guy. This guy is probably like, 10 years older than Gintoki, but he's a master at combat. And his first fight with Oboro is ass kicking. He basically lost this fight, and it wasn't until 2017's Gintama was he able to win this fight. So his first battle with Oboro, and who happens to actually looks like him, or very much look like Gintoki, beats Gintoki easy. I to this very day believe like Oboro is somewhat related to Gintoki, but turns out that's not the case. He just happens to have the same type of hair color that Gintoki has. That's it, nothing else. And he's a government lapdog, so to speak. But as strong and as powerful as Gintama was, and rage fueled, and as Gintama was, once he realized that they were making fun of his dead master, either due to lack of concentration or either due to the fact of skill, I don't know which. Oboro is a far better fighter than him at the moment, and it's only until Gintama 2017 that during their second fight was he able to finally beat Oboro. So Oboro was kicking Gintoki's ass way back during the Revolutionary War, but the fight with Amato when his master was still alive. Oboro still kicked his ass even now, and it's only during I believe their third fight. One fight was in the past, one fight was here, and the next fight, the final fight between him and Oboro was during the 2017 Gintama, where he finally beats Oboro, and that story comes to a conclusion. And it's during the fight with finally defeating Oboro, we go into the next arc, which was the arc of both of Gintoki and of Tusgaru or Shinsuke, however you want to call them, fighting each other to say, the time of our master is at an end. We must push forward. And Gintoki says, the time of the samurais will never come to an end. We must push forward. So Shinsuke represents a period of Japan trying to say, you can't cling to what was in order to save what is now. And Gintoki is saying, if you just throw away your traditions, you're nothing. So they're two fighting forces. They're two Japanese beliefs clashing against each other here. Both of them are valid, but it's mostly about them trying to come to terms with the loss of their master, and both of them refusing to believe that their master died for the way that their master died. One of them is a bad guy. One of them is a good guy. One took the bad path. One took the good path. One of them is moon. One of them is the sun. Gintoki is the sun. Tusgaru is the moon. So they're basically like a Kyo and I forgot his name in the King of Fighters. game. So Rio or something like that. ERE. Yeah, they're basically like that. So or in Street Fighter Logic, they're like a Ken and Kuma. No, not even. No, I wouldn't say Street Fighter. I would say King of Fire. So moving on from that, we get to go to the last. Actually, no. I believe this was the last image of Gintama. And yes, it's been more than an hour and 45 minutes, but I wasn't planning on having any episodes that extend past certain arc. I could do every arc there possibly is in Gintama, but I'm not going to. I just want to show the essential core aspects of why Gintama is good, why it's in the top five, why it's considered essential watching, and why when people say, well, it's really not that funny, it really is, or it's really not that serious, it really is. It gets from very nice to very dark to very bleak real quickly. And this doesn't happen in the early 2000s arc. It happens only in the 2015 and the 2017's arc. So if you want the more darker aspect of that, which is Gintama, you would have to watch anything that came after mid 2015s or during the mid 2015s episode to everything in 2017. 2017 took Gintama very seriously, and everything before the 2015s were very light. So 2 years of nothing but serious Gintama, or 2 to 3 years of nothing but serious Gintama, whereas many years of hilarious Gintama. So this is the reason why it's in my top five. If I wanted serious, I could always find it. If I wanted comedy, I could always find it. If I'm having a bad day, I don't go watch Naruto. If I'm having a bad day, I don't go watch Hunter x Hunter. If I'm having a bad day, I don't go watch Dragon Ball Z. If I wanted simply to laugh and to have fun and to enjoy myself, but I need a consistent amount that's equal to, you know, intense hilarity, intense traumatic hilarity. I need it. That's so potent. Like it's like the difference between a latte and a coffee. I need more potency in my cup of coffee. That's what Gintama is. And that's the only reason it's in that top five slot. Because it has that essential quality that makes a comedy, even though it could be all over the place sometimes, but that's also an appeal of the anime. It has that fourth breaking that's Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool level, which also is the essential part for many people, a form of fun and enjoyment. It also has that serious nature to its existence and its world that's been present there since day one. It just never elaborated on this until the 2000s and 2016 and 2017. So, that said, Gintama is top tier, top shelf anime. And the best part about Gintama, you do not have to watch any of the early episodes past or early before 2000 and before 2000, or should I say any episode after 2015. No, you don't have to watch any episode before 2015 in order to comprehend what's going on in Gintama. That everything before 2015 was simply part of the enjoyment of Gintama, and you could use every episode or every arc within that show, which took a lot of serious steps and took a lot of half steps and took a lot of mid steps and had very serious arcs. The whole Flames arc was very serious past before the 2015 came around, and many other arcs were also serious before 2015 Gintamas came around. So I like the show simply because it represents all aspects of anime in one, just like One Piece does. But at many times it takes itself far more seriously and far more mature than those shows ever could, because it's a level of need for you to have a mature mind to understand what's going on is essential in order to watch what's going on. Because if you say I'm confused and this is stupid, it's because you're not old enough yet to understand what's going on. You're not old enough to understand the fourth wall breaking. You're not old enough to understand the parody. You're not old enough to understand the sexual themes. You're not old enough to understand the hilarity. You're not old enough to understand the aesthetics, or the parody, or the similes, or even the violent nature and the emotional behavior and the transition between hilarity and seriousness in almost like a heartbeat. It's like one moment is serious, the next moment is hilarity, the next moment is serious again. If your mind's not mature enough to transition between those moments, between those beats, between those harmonies of what makes Gintama Gintama, you haven't fully understand how the story was made or what Gintama is. If you're looking for something specific that's more grounded and follow a smooth level, then that's not Gintama. Gintama is meant for people who want a whole lot of stuff thrown into the pot of their soup. They want a mixed combination of everything. Like just like every human being, not all human beings want to eat the same thing every day. They want to eat variety. But some days you want to eat everything all at the same time, not just variety. You just want to eat a combination of things all at once to just show that you not only can eat it, but that those flavors mash together, mix something into a bowl of soup of many broth compounds and dumplings and sliced tomatoes, the whole 9 yards, make it taste bizarre, but at the same time fulfilling and different. And that's the only reason why Gintama is in my top five. It's that mesh. It's that mesh compound of soup that's essential every now and again for the survival of anime to exist. Without an anime like Gintama, anime wouldn't last beyond a certain point and become something that's quite niche and quite boring and quite bland and simple-minded, and will transition from decade to decade and to decade until something like Gintama comes around again. Of course, Lucky Stars and all those other animes sometimes does it, but they never do it to the level of ridiculousness and hilarity and parody that Gintama has. Like I said before, every now and again, you have to have at least one parody of comedy as essential for your life. Now, if you don't have one parody, you have to have one comedic thing that's essential for your life in whatever that comedy thing is. In my life, it's always been Gintama, because there's no type of show that I've ever watched that was that funny that I didn't believe that it did not take a book out of Gintama's book to create it and put it into their book. Just like Gintama itself took certain things that he knew from reality and from everything around it to make it what it is. So, in many ways, it's an anime that's existed only simply because the world exists of comedy exists. So when you're watching Gintama, you're watching the world of comedy and what is comedy and what is reality meshed into one. So it's an example of the culture, it's an example of our heritage, and it's an example of our time within the period that we existed on this planet until the next form of entertainment comes around. So it will be the essential example of who we were during this time period and what we consider to be entertainment based on years upon years or decades upon decades of previous thing now meshed into one show. So that's why it's in on my fifth place. So I'm going to call it a day on this one. It's the first one that I did that's just 2 hours, but simply because I didn't go over the entire saga of what Gintama is, because there's so many arcs in Gintama beyond those of any other anime, because Gintama's arcs are very small and there's so many and they're plentiful. It's hard to lock them all down. I'm going to leave it here between this memorable and epic fight between Gintama and his fellow rival. So this is Gintama. Go check it out. If you find something more funnier than Gintama, That's only because decades down the road, or maybe 5 years down the road, someone decided to create something more hilarious. If this came out during the same time that whatever anime came out that's current, um, Gintama would blow it out the water. In fact, to this very day, it's considered one of the greatest comedy animes of all time in Japan. In fact, I believe the Japanese culture has it as the number one or the number two anime of all times when it comes to comedy. So it's it will always be in that top three slot. Even if it fall out of its top two slot, it will always be in those top three slot. And obviously it will always be in the top five comedy animes of all time slot. So if someone doesn't have Gintama in their top five, it's the same as someone telling everyone or every person that's ever watched anime in Japan, no, 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 you Japanese people are all wrong. We know you created the anime and stuff, and we know you what you consider fun, but this is what we and the rest of the world consider fun. Anime basically came from you guys, but this is what we consider fun. Well, good for you. Um, an entire culture cannot be wrong when it comes to something, ever. Just like, how could a billion Chinese people be wrong about fried rice or noodles or a cup of noodles or box of noodles? How can a billion Chinese people be wrong? I believe that was a quote from a movie called The Lost Boys. But it's not just a quote, it's the truth. If it tastes good and a billion Chinese people like box noodles, how can they all be wrong? The same as Gintama. If millions upon millions of Japanese people enjoy Gintama and consider it to be in the top five of best animes of all time when it comes to comedy, how can they all be wrong? So if you don't have Gintama as one of in your top five comedies, it doesn't have to be in your top five list of greatest animes. But if it's not in your top five of greatest comedy, then what does that say about you? You're limited. That's what it says. And you gotta watch more anime. That's also what it says. So I'm done. I'm out, and that's it for this video. And that's it for my top fives. Next year, I'll continue another top five, maybe gaming top fives. But no more of these videos. That's all I gotta say. I could have found something else to replace my fifth place. But if you don't have any type of comedy, if you as a human being and you watch anime don't have a comedy, at least one comedy in your top five, what does that say about you when you get stressed out? You telling me when you get stressed out, you're going to watch anime about murdering people? Or if when you get stressed out, you want to watch a show about, Dragon Ball Z where people are throwing powers? That's how you relieve stress, by watching people beat the shit out of each other? Nah, man. My form of releasing stress is watching either a journey, an adventure, or a comedy. Anything that has any type of violence towards it. If it's not part of a journey, if it's not part of the arc of excelling past one's level, if it's not part of a comedy act or a form of comedy, if it has to do with darkness and violence, and then that's not relieving stress. That's just giving me more stress. I got no time for that. And this list is mostly for people in my clan, but it's also for people who are down with anime. And I highly recommend Gintama. You gotta check it out. And there's no way you could not laugh watching Gintama, because I watch every comedy anime out there. And the ones that I haven't watched are probably the more current comedy animes. And they've all made me laugh. But they've never made me laugh to the level of, this is completely ridiculous, that Gintama has made me laugh. So that should tell you something of how powerful Gintama is. So I'm out, and that's it. I'll probably go watch a Gintama episode directly after this. Probably going to watch the Shogun arc, which I didn't include on this video. Or I'm going to probably watch, what's that episode? Tama's arc, the robot who's also on their crew. You could also check that one out. Or no. I'm going to watch Gintoki's arc. Gintoki's arc is the character of a guy called Gintoki who looks just like Gintoki but has yellow hair. Yeah, that's the one I'm going to watch right now, Gintoki. Just type in Gintoki arc and you'll see Gintoki. So that's it for Gintama. I'm out. Calling it a day.